SEC, SEC, SEC. Power rankings right here at the Voice of College Football. Please like the video, share these videos out on social media, subscribe right here at the Voice of College Football. Best discussion, best debate, best analysis because of your contribution right here at the Voice of College Football. We're going to run them down. This is the final regular season edition, at least 14 all the way up to Georgia. I think we'll have to wait and see. We kind of measured that one out. Maybe I'll process some stats late to try to figure it out between Georgia and Ole Miss. Anyway, at number 14 in the rankings, of course, we've got the school, the team, the university, the coaching staff, the players that should be the proudest by far for any last place in the power rankings in any conference, and that's Vandy. Give it up to Vandy, 2-6 in the SEC, 5-7 overall. Respectable season for the Commodores at 5-7. Almost made a bowl game. Came within a mere 56-0, 59-0 against Tennessee, getting to a bowl game. But hey, the high on this season for Vandy, obviously, beating Kentucky in the final 15 seconds of the game to win an SEC game for the first time in 26 tries after that kind of losing streak. And then they just didn't become Vandy again the next week. They beat Florida. So 2 consecutive wins for Vandy before the letdown against Tennessee, of course, to finish off the year. But what a back-to-back weekends for the Commodores. The low on the season, they could have made it to a bowl game. Tennessee lost Hendon Hooker, playing at home for the 6th win. And of course they lost to Tennessee. They're a much better team, but 59-0. That's the low on the season for Vandy. Vandy at number 14. At number 13 in the SEC. And based on the records, we could have dropped this disappointing team, the most embarrassing team in all of college football. Dropped them to number 14, but there's a reason I kept them at number 13. It's Texas A&M. Identical 5-7, 2-6 record in the SEC. Their high for the season was the very beginning. 6th ranked in the Associated Press poll to start the season. And then the first 2 wins, yeah, they beat up on a couple horrible teams, of course, to get to the 2-0 place. So number 6 in the nation. And then after that, that was it. Well, the ending finished well as well. You got to credit this team from coming together against a good LSU team and winning the final game of the season. The low was everything after App State. The App State game was the microcosm of the season right there. Losing to App State at home, 17-9, and then everything beyond that, or 17-12. It was just one big downer for Texas A&M. The most disappointing team in college football, and this is carried into the offseason. Check out the transfer portal. At number 13, the Aggies. At number 12, a team that defeated Texas A&M 13-10 under one Cadillac Williams, and that's, of course, Auburn. The high is Cadillac. Cadillac showing up, saving the program, saving the team for, some decent efforts under Cadillac Williams. Now, he did not win the job, so maybe the high on this team should be the energy and excitement that Cadillac brought to the Plains for that fine night against Texas A&M, and then the Hugh Freeze hiring. That, of course, the highlight of this season and off season for Auburn football. The low, the Brian Harsin failure. Now, a lot of people were not concerned or in any way sad about seeing Brian Harsin leave, but just the entire hiring that seemed a bit strange, odd fit, disappointing first season, lose 5 consecutive games to close out the year, and then the off season, even though most of it was brought to light that it was not Brian Harsin's fault, all the allegations, and it just was not a good look and good perception, and the coaching staff leaves. And yes, the culmination of Brian Harsin leaving, just the failure of the last 2 seasons for Auburn football. That's the low on the Plains. All right, at number 11 in the SEC, we go to Arkansas. Arkansas still made a bowl game at 6-6. They will take on Kansas in the Liberty Bowl. The high came right out of the gate. They played well against a good Cincinnati team and what proved to be a good South Carolina team. They looked dominant in those games. They were by far the better teams. 2-0, and then it just came crashing down. And what really led to the demise of Arkansas football this year, they had a chance to go up 21-7, on Texas A&M. KJ Jefferson tried to leap the pile, take it in 21-7, gets it knocked away, scoop and score the other way for Texas A&M. Suddenly, a 2-touchdown dominant performance in running away from the Aggies turned into 14-all, and then clank off the upright. They still could have saved the game with a game-winning field goal, but clank off the upright. They lose to Arkansas, or lose to Texas A&M 23-21. That was the downfall of Arkansas football, along with losing KJ Jefferson for the mid part of the season. Arkansas, number 11 in our rankings in the SEC. At number 10, we go to Mizzou, who was able to claim this lofty number 10 position by defeating Arkansas in the finale 29-27. They make a bowl game because of it. At 6-6, they will take on Wake Forest in the postseason. Eli Drinkwitz has landed in a very stagnant, mediocre spot at 6-6 with another 500 season. He did the same last year, 6-6, lost a bowl game. 3-5 in the SEC. The high, South Carolina had just defeated Texas A&M, which seemed like a big deal at the time. Mizzou comes into Columbia, the other Columbia, and they manhandle South Carolina 23-10. They also had the win against Arkansas, of course, to get them bowl eligible. Those were the big highs. And playing Georgia, this might be the most impressive. Playing Georgia better than anybody in the country, down to the wire. Those were the highs for Mizzou football this year. The low, they lost 4 consecutive games to Power 5 teams to start the season. That's Missouri football at number 10 in our SEC power rankings. At number 9, we go to a team that defeated Mizzou by a touchdown, and that's Florida. 6-6, and the high on the season for the Gators, certainly. Opening night in Gainesville, in the swamp, Billy Napier's first game, and he pulls it off against a top 10 team with a goal line stand-in end zone interception against Cam Rising. Florida starts 1-0 with a top 10 win in Billy Napier's tenure. That was the high. The low, the Vandy loss had to be. It's embarrassing to lose to Vandy. At least they weren't the team that broke the losing streak. We'll talk a little bit more about Kentucky Blue here coming up. So at number 9 in the SEC, the Florida Gators, and their postseason date is against Oregon State at the Las Vegas Bowl. At number 8, the aforementioned Wildcats of Kentucky. They only finished 7-5. They did have some bright spots. Their highs on the season, their best win was against Mississippi State, and Will Rogers really played a great defensive game. And then to close out the campaign, they finish at 7-5 because they disposed of rival Louisville, who was playing some good football. Kentucky gets the win comfortably by 2 scores. The low, 26 consecutive losses for Vandy in the SEC, and they knock off Kentucky. So that's the low when you lose to Vandy, no doubt. Kentucky's got a bowl game. They take on Iowa for a second consecutive season. Shame on you bowl schedulers for even coming up with that one. Let's play some different teams, Kentucky and Iowa, in the Music City Bowl this year. At number 7 in the SEC, a team that took a tumble, Ole Miss and Lane Kiffin at 8-4. The high on this season, well, the 8-1 start. No question about that. They started as well at 7-0 with a key win against Kentucky when they stopped the Wildcats on 3 consecutive red zone possessions. And then another high, 17-3 lead against LSU in the game that they blew in Baton Rouge and got blown away in the second half. And really the high came when Lane Kiffin turned down Auburn. That was the true high leading into the future. But there's still work to do at Ole Miss because they're not a top-notch football team. They certainly showed us in the final 3 in dropping 3 consecutive games, including blowing that lead against LSU and losing 3 straight, including the famed Egg Bowl matchup against rival Mississippi State. At number 7 in the SEC is Ole Miss, and they're off to their postseason game in the Texas Bowl against the Red Raiders of Texas Tech. At number 6 in the SEC, a lofty rating and power ranking, especially considering where they started. That's South Carolina, 8-4. And considering where they are versus the final 2 games of the season, maybe the 2 most impressive back-to-back wins in all of college football. The high for South Carolina this year, yes, Tennessee, Clemson. They beat an Eastern Division rival and knocked them out of the playoffs. They beat their arch rival after losing how many consecutive? Going all the way back to 2014. 2014 through 21, 8 consecutive losses to Clemson and knocked them out of the playoff. How sweet it is. South Carolina's low this season. Lost to Missouri 23-10, coming off a win against Texas A&M, could not keep the momentum. But later in the season, after that huge effort against Tennessee, to follow that up in Death Valley, good work, Shane Beamer and South Carolina, our number 6 team in the SEC, with a date against Notre Dame in Jacksonville at the Gator Bowl. At number 5 in the league, we've got Mississippi State. They're high to conclude the season after a bit of a midseason slump, defeating Ole Miss. It's always big in the state of Mississippi to get that Magnolia win over your arch rival. So to finish out at 8-4, there it is for Mississippi State defeating Ole Miss. The low for the Bulldogs this season, Bama just bludgeoned them, just blew them out. Bama looked vulnerable. Barely escaped some teams like Texas A&M within the division, had lost, and then, yes, Mississippi State, just for the umpteenth consecutive year, just could not handle Bama. They get blown out every year by the Tide, and this one 30-6, and they scored in the final seconds, really 30-0. At number 4 in the SEC, they played in the championship game. Brian Kelly's first year included 4 losses, but a big success. LSU 9-4 after the 50-30 loss to Georgia. The big high was, of course, as a 2-touchdown underdog in Death Valley against Alabama, going for it on the 2-point conversion, getting it, and celebrating like we haven't seen at LSU since, well, 2019. And getting to the SEC championship game. The low had to be that effort at Kyle Field. Everyone in the nation knew, even though LSU had 2 losses, they were the one team in the best position to become the first team to lose 2 and go to the college football playoff. And they go to Texas A&M, where the Aggies had no pulse, and they laid an egg. That was the big disappointment this year for Brian Kelly and LSU. Our number 4 team in our Voice of College Football SEC Power Rankings. At number 3, they don't like being number 3. They don't like being number 2, but they're number 3 right now, and that's Alabama. Bama finished 10-2, made a claim that they should be included in the playoff. The Nick Saban playoff campaigning tour lasted the weekend, but they miss out and go to the Sugar Bowl against Kansas State. All right, the high for the Tide, by Bama standards, nothing. I guess the high would be that the Bama standards are so high that 10-2 and top 5 in the nation is not good enough. The low on this season, of course, was, from a playing standpoint, it was the Texas A&M game. Huge disappointment there. Did not play well. The Texas game, but they escaped those 2, so they didn't matter. The 2 that really hurt, of course, losing on the last play of the game in Death Valley and at Neyland Stadium, and losing to their out-of-division rival for the first time in forever since Nick Saban's year prior to Nick Saban, I believe, in 2006. So Bama on to the Sugar Bowl and Kansas State. Our number 2 team in the SEC, and this is clear for me, 2 beat 3. Tennessee won the game at Neyland Stadium against Alabama, and even though the Crimson Tide did more campaigning for that final playoff spot, we ranked Tennessee above Bama. We go with the results, and Tennessee finished at 10-2. The big win, the big high on the season isn't even close. Beat Bama 52-49. It lost 15 consecutive games to the Tide. The low on the season, the South Carolina game, which knocked Tennessee from playoff contention, of course, 63-38, completely annihilated in the second half of that game. And wave goodbye to Hendon Hooker, unfortunately, due to an injury. And then also wave goodbye to the college football playoff and wave goodbye to everything. Hendon Hooker did not get a Heisman invite either. So that's the big disappointment, is Hendon Hooker had a remarkable season. He gets hurt late, doesn't get invited to the Heisman, and Tennessee finishes 10-2, and they go play the Orange Bowl against Clemson. And at Number 1, Georgia. Of course. 13-0 SEC champions did something this year that they did not accomplish last year. They won the conference. They got a great quarterback, great running game, offensive line, and the defense, of course, is nearly as good as it was last year. The high started with week 1 with Oregon and sending a message, delivering a statement that we lost 5 first-round draft picks, I believe 14 players overall, and we're still the best. Blasted Oregon, and Oregon turned out to be a good team. 49-3, and they pretty much didn't let up the entire season. I know you're going to bring up Mizzou and Kent State. Those are the lows. If you're going to come up with a low on a 13-0 season, there really is no low point for this team at this point. But it would have been the Kent State and the Missouri games in which they did not perform up to standard. It's Georgia. It's Ohio State in the national semifinal in Atlanta. Your thoughts below about the college football playoff involving Georgia. And, of course, our SEC power rankings right here at the Voice of College Football. We will see you next time.